Hello everybody, welcome to Calfield Services channel once again. Today your host is Odi Sabure. I'm going to talk about how to conduct market research, particularly if you are in the small stock production enterprise or you are planning to acquire finance or financing for your small stock project that you anticipate to build. This production is channeled especially towards youth who are aiming to tap into the Youth Development Fund provided by the government of Botswana. So, what is market research in general? And what purpose does it serve when you want to establish an enterprise? Market research means going out there, collecting information regarding the project you want to establish. Why do we want to collect that information, and why do we want to do that? One, we want to ascertain whether there is interest in the services or product we want to offer. Two, in other words, we are basically ascertaining whether there are potential consumers out there for the products we want. In this case, the consumers would be butchers, it would be retail stores, it would be anybody that would want to buy goat meat or live goats, or small stock in general for purposes generally of consumption or multiply farming enterprise for whoever the buyer is. So where do we get that type of information? You have to go and get to organizations that provide statistics with regards to the numbers of small stock in the country, where they do well or where they fare well. And then you also have to collect data regarding distribution of meat products in the country, who sells meat and who buys the meat for what purposes. You need all this information. And then in addition to that, you need the demographics of the clientele or the consumers of these products for you to be able to know whether these products are consumed by people at home, generally domestically, or these products go to shops and organizations, or these products are skewed towards the working generation amongst the population groups, or these products are consumed more at schools or wherever. Basically, that's what I'm trying to expose with this sharing here today. Now, when you have all that information, you now need to know where to obtain small stock that you'll start off your project with, which would be your startup input in terms of how to run that project. Now, when you have that information too, and you are able to confidently say it is something that would continue to be accessible in terms of you acquiring that small stock, because we are dealing with running a project where you take care of living animals that could die, that could be depleted at any given point in time. So you'd want to be able to replenish your stock whenever such type of tragedy happens, or whenever you make that calculated move and you put a good number for sale. You need to replenish your breeding. It's not breeding stock. Basically, it's breeding stock. You need to replenish your breeding stock so that you're able to continue the turnover of your project as a going concern. Now, once you have gathered all this information, you also need to, that would be your desktop information that would help you to know how the small stock demographics is dispersed or distributed around the country. And then once you have this information, you now need to look at your business operation model, how it will churn out animals that are ready for sale, the expenditure you go through, the period it will take, and the potential revenue you would attain with each sales that you'll make over a certain period of selling time that you would have set aside for your project. Once you have all that information, you also need to validate it amongst those who are key players within that value chain. The value chain in this case I'm referring to the people you buy the goods from. I'm referring to the sectors that consume the product. I'm also referring to those that distribute the product around, from those who produce them to those who consume them. So the feedback you get from all these sectors of different groups of people would be able to tell you whether this is a project you'd be able to run or not. Is it within the confines of your resources or your ability to access resources that could help you run the project as a going concern? Now, when you've gathered all this information, you now need to also, like I mentioned earlier, you need to validate some of this information. How do you do that? You can do interviews, you can use questionnaires, you can use the survey is a questionnaire. You can do face-to-face visits to people so that you also employ your ability to observe what is happening around some of these places or some of these projects, so that you appreciate how the project is run before you set your foot in that industry. Once you have all this information, you now need what? To culminate it together into one meaningful write-up that will be able to show you whether you can put the numbers together which would allow this project to become profitable. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about you now putting together the expenditure required to put to assemble the project as a going concern, and then you look at those predictions or estimates for the sales that you will be able to make over defined periods of time going forward. And when you put together these numbers against each other, you should be able to tell where the break-even point is, number of livestock or number of small stock you would require to break even, the amount of takeouts or sales you would need to make for you to generate that revenue that can allow you to break even, and how long it will take you to break even. And then after that, what happens with the project going forward. And in between, you look at the expenditure surrounding how you sustain all this mechanism to be intertwined such that it runs smoothly for you to be able to keep the processes going until you get to a point where now you reap the rewards of the setup of your project. So having done that and being able to tell on paper statistically that this is a project that I will be able to run in this way for me to be able to sustain it and gain the revenue that I anticipate to gain, then you should know you have done your part. Now, it doesn't end there. That is market analysis and the statistics you get from them. What if something goes wrong? What if tomorrow there is a form of a coronavirus outbreak, but this one aimed at small stock and wipes out the population of small stock where you can get your raw materials and to whomever you can sell to? Because if there is no availability of raw materials, how else are you going to sustain that project if everyone else is failing to run that type of a project? So you need a contingency plan. A contingency plan can be done in different ways. The key obvious ones is you need to have an added layout of budget estimate that would overlay the actual budget that is required to run the project, so that you are able to, in terms of challenges like I mentioned, in terms of prompted expansion, because you never know. It's not always about challenges. Sometimes it can be a huge opportunity that opens up. Let's say maybe in the neighboring country, Zambia, where they out of nowhere want a huge number of small stock to be exported there. You should be in a position where you are able to quickly scale up your project so that you tap onto that market opportunity that would have presented itself at that point in time. So contingency in terms of money set aside for that. You can include this requirement if you are someone who is outsourcing or sourcing the funds from a financier like a bank, like CEDA, or even the YDF, like we mentioned earlier. So if that contingency fee or amount is there, you'll always know it's a fallback option for you to plug in, the gaps that you find yourself having while you are busy operating this enterprise. The other way of providing contingency is, for me, it's not necessarily contingency, but I term it as contingency because it's a strategic move that you put in place. You have to build this. When we talk about the value chain in small stock production industry, you are referring to different aspects and different factors, different bodies, different mechanisms that when put together, they interlink such that they feed each other, support each other. It's a support structure that allows you to be able to source your raw materials easily, to be able to distribute your products easily, such that the movement of what needs to be moved around is seamless and sort of support the business enterprises that are interlinked by this production line. All right. Now, you need to build proper strategic linkages with all these key players. For example, if you are someone who is rearing goats for selling, then you have to have a good relationship with butcheries around you, which is the market. You also need to have good relationship with reliable raw material suppliers. That is the farms or the people that when the going gets tough, they always have something that you can get from them in the form of a few animals or small stock. And then you look at other things that you might need, like supplements here and there. And you need to build relationships with those shops or markets that are able to provide you with that leverage or leeway for you to be able to continue your project going when other people are reacting to a negative situation. You have already built these synergic relationships with these key players who are fundamental for the existence and the going concern part of your enterprise. Does it sound complicated? Maybe it does. But once you have done it once and you have fallen on your knee, the lessons you pick from there will help you rise up. The lessons you pick from there, it's not only the lessons, the pain that comes with the losses that you incur as you try to navigate your way around on how to run this enterprise profitably will make you a better person, will toughen up your skin, will blow up your resolve and make you, absorb more than what would have broken you in the first instance. So it might sound like it's a bit complicated or it's a bit technical, but it's quite simple. And in most cases, how do you deal with a situation like this, especially when you enter a business fraternity that you are not familiar with? I always tell people that, you are better off, after having drawn this business plan, because basically what I've been talking about is the marketing plan or the marketing strategy, which is a component of the business plan. More often than not, you need to make an arranged trip where you move around this value chain of interconnected different service providers that can help your project run smoothly. You observe how each component functions such that as you move around, you are able to identify the gaps that you have and the type of relationships you need to build with these networks for you to be able to benefit from whatever it is they are providing. So a benchmark trip around all this is imperative. Once you have done that and you've collected the notes around that, then you come back home and you put all the dots together. And then the next step for you now is to simulate. In the case of animals, how do you simulate? You run the actual project. You start with small numbers and then you run it over a certain period of time. With small stock, I think a period of 12 months. 12 months should be enough for you to be able to have sold, taken out a certain portion into your market, and by that time you would have been able to observe whether this is cut for you in terms of a project, or whether you need to make some serious adjustments for you to find your way around it. So this is what I wanted to share for now. I can't share everything, because when you talk about market research, when you talk about market access, when you talk about strategic planning, these are very broad concepts, and sometimes they are very specific in nature when it comes to industries. For example, the approach we'd use in this instance in the small stock production enterprise would be totally different from someone who's in the manufacturing sector, or someone who's in the textile sector, or wherever, in a different sector where the business mechanisms are totally different from the ones we are referring to. Even within the agricultural sector, those who are in small stock production operate completely differently from those who are in crop production, for example. But the overarching principles of the approach is pretty much similar. So the intricacies of how to implement that approach is where it will differ. And the good thing is they are always experts in all these different sectors. So you just need to identify the right key people that can give you the kind of leads or information you require, so that you are able to prepare yourself before you indulge in the actual project. Do you like what I've just shared now? If you did, keep watching this space, because more will come. I'll keep touching on this and that, but ultimately the whole objective of running these videos for now is to help those SMEs, either startups or those that have started and that are trying to hold their own in the competitive environment, and find ways to perfect their processes, so that they're able to stand that chance of scaling up. This is your channel. Keep plugging in, keep sending your comments, keep sending your questions, share anything that you think would be insightful, so that we can also look at it and then prepare a presentation for the next show, which will basically address that issue would have raised. Having said that, I would cut this video short for now and say bye-bye for now. And like I said, like, share, and subscribe, and more will come. Enjoy.